Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we are getting into some genuinely mind-bending work by the linguist and researcher James Paul Gee. We're going to explore this totally fascinating theory that connects the grammar we use every single day to the complex social choices we make, and ultimately, to the very fabric of our society. So let's just dive right in. So, why do humans have grammar in their heads, but donkeys don't? Okay, I know, it sounds like the setup to a bad joke, right? But Gee actually uses this question to hook us into a really profound realization. It's pretty widely accepted in linguistics that humans have a biological instinct for grammar. Gee points out that he lives on a farm with a bunch of animals, and he's absolutely positive his donkeys don't have grammar in their heads. So the real question isn't just that humans have it, but why we have it. What is it actually doing up there, and what evolutionary or social purpose does it serve us?
Well, Gee argues that grammar isn't just this rigid set of textbook rules that you were forced to memorize back in school. It's actually an infinite system of choices. We're literally built to communicate by making and signaling these choices to one another. Think about it like picking out a tie. If there were only one color of tie in the whole world, choosing to wear it wouldn't mean anything at all. But because there are hundreds of colors and patterns, your specific choice of tie suddenly communicates a public meaning. People might wonder, why did they choose that specific color? Grammar works the exact same way. It's a menu of choices we constantly use to signal meaning.
And what's really wild is how Gee takes this whole idea of grammar and applies it way beyond just spoken words. Take the grammar of clothes, for instance. Gee looks at 3 different generations of Stanford-educated professors. The oldest generation regularly wore full suits to class. Why? It was a choice that displayed their status, aligning them with business professionals. But then Gee's own baby boomer generation came along and completely rejected that, dressing casually to basically thumb their noses at those traditional status norms. And today's newest professors? They dress even more casually. This isn't just random individual preference. It's a highly complex, nonverbal, grammatical system of social choices, and it has very real consequences.
This idea that our choices mutually construct our reality extends to our physical actions too. Just imagine you're standing on a curb with your arm raised. If a yellow taxi pulls over and you get in, you have successfully hailed a cab. Boom! You're now a passenger, a subject bound to the rules, regulations, and fares of that specific transit institution. But let's say a random civilian car pulls over instead and you get in. You are suddenly a hitchhiker, subject to a completely different set of social norms. That simple, physical choice of raising your arm interacts with the environment to mutually construct your identity in that exact moment. It's like a giant puzzle.
Section 1. Saying, doing, and being. Language is a multifaceted tool. Let's see how this core concept reveals what language actually accomplishes when we interact with one another.
The crucial point here is summed up perfectly by Gee himself. He says, when we speak or write, we are simultaneously saying something, doing something, and being something. To put that into perspective, imagine a math teacher asking a student, "Mary, what do you think?" The teacher is obviously saying words, but what are they doing and being in that moment? If that teacher is acting as a strict traditional assessor, that question is a test and it's going to be graded. But if the teacher is being a progressive facilitator, well, that exact same question is just a prompt to kick off an open class discussion. Misunderstanding who the teacher is being could literally wreck Mary's grade.
Now, this shift in thinking completely revolutionized how we view reading and writing. As Gee points out, over the past 40 years, our understanding evolved dramatically. Literacy basically wandered out of the isolated human mind and into the broader social world. It is no longer just seen as a mental phenomenon, a simple code to crack in your brain, but rather as a deeply social and cultural phenomenon that shifts dynamically based on who we happen to be interacting with.
Section 2. The Big D Discourse. Pulling off a socially significant identity. This brings us to probably the most famous concept from James Paul Gee's entire body of work.
Gee makes a really distinct separation here that is absolutely crucial to grasp. First, we have little d discourse. This is simply language in use, just the connected stretches of words we speak or write to one another. But then we have big D discourse. Big D discourse isn't just words. It is the whole identity kit, the whole shebang. It captures the complex ways in which people enact and are recognized as socially and historically significant kinds of people.
To truly belong to a Big D discourse, you need this entire kit. I mean, one person might simultaneously be a street gang member, an honor student, and a hip-hop fan. But to successfully pull off any of these identities out there in the real world, just talking the talk is definitely not enough. You have to use the right words, sure, but you also have to use the right gestures, wear the right clothes, hold the right props, and display the right values. If you walk into a gritty neighborhood biker bar wearing freshly pressed designer jeans and politely demand a napkin to protect them, well, your grammar might be flawless, but your big D discourse is completely wrong. You are not going to be accepted.
And this brilliantly illustrates what happens when you don't quite have that full identity kit. G introduces this fascinating concept called mush fake, which is actually a term he borrows from prison culture. When inmates make hats out of underwear to protect their hair from lice because real hats just aren't available, they are making do. In linguistics, mush fake is what happens when someone has only partially acquired the rules of a dominant social group, but they use their strategic meta-knowledge to fake it and survive. It's like a job applicant adopting a super formal academic tone to survive a tough interview, even if that's not their native, everyday discourse at all.
Section 3. Primary versus secondary discourses, from the living room to the public sphere. Let's shift our focus to how and where we actually pick up these complex identity kits throughout our lives.
We all start out with a primary discourse. This is our foundational, everyday identity. We learn it super early in life from our family and our immediate community. It forms our core sense of self. But as we grow up, we inevitably crash into secondary discourses. These are acquired later on out in more public institutions, places like schools, workplaces, government agencies, and churches. You have to learn how to navigate these new spaces. And sometimes the values and language of a secondary discourse can directly conflict with the primary discourse you learned back home.
And here is a kind of tough truth for our education system. Big D discourses cannot simply be overtly taught from a blackboard. You literally cannot sit someone down in a classroom, hand them a textbook, and expect to overtly teach them to be a linguist or be a lawyer. Because discourses involve such complex values, actions, and beliefs, they can only be mastered through enculturation and scaffolded apprenticeship with people who have already mastered that discourse. You have to practice being it with the experts.
Section 4. The Power of Grammar. How syntactic choices shape human reality. Now let's look at the profound, real-world consequences of our grammatical choices.
To show how grammar literally dictates perception, let's look at two different ways a journalist can frame a protest. They could write, "A member of a group was bloodied." That uses a passive voice, placing the focus entirely on the member as a victim. Or they could write, "A large group of protesters bloodied a member." That's an active choice that shifts the focus directly onto the actions of the protesters themselves. Neither of these is grammatically wrong, but the syntactic choice completely shifts the reality being framed for the reader. It's wild.
Let's look at another real-world example from an ESL testing program in Arizona that G highlights. He contrasts two different grammatical patterns. First, we have the locator pattern. Saying John scored a 3 on the test simply locates John's result on a list. It's just a spatial relationship. But over time, the institution's language subtly shifted to a personal property pattern, saying instead, John is a 3.
The consequence of this subtle grammatical shift is absolutely massive. A simple test score location morphed into a defining personal attribute. Teachers subconsciously began attributing internal personality traits to these students based solely on the grammar. They started saying things in interviews like, well, my level 4s are more self-initiated, or my level 3s follow directions better. There is zero scientific evidence that language proficiency correlates with being naturally proactive. But because the grammar changed from scored a 3 to is a 3, the educators effectively created a brand new type of human subject, artificially limiting a student's potential based entirely on a grammatical label.
Which leaves us with this final, really powerful question to reflect on. What big D discourses do you belong to? How are you walking the walk and talking the talk in your own life? And more importantly, how is your daily grammar and the choices you make within it actively shaping the identities and realities of the people around you? Think about the true power of your words today. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and remember to keep questioning the choices behind the language you use every single day.